The mark on her neck looked like a brand. Kang Min-ho's vision tunneled the moment he saw it, everything else in his office dissolving into white noise except that purple bruise blooming just below Jasmine Carter's jaw. His assistant, his brilliant, untouchable assistant who'd worked for him for 8 months without ever letting anyone close enough to breathe on her, stood beside his desk with a file in her hands, completely unaware that she'd just detonated something savage inside him. Someone had touched her. Someone had marked her. And Min-ho, who'd spent 3 years building an empire on control, felt that control fracturing like ice under pressure. Welcome to Story World, besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. Jasmine didn't notice his stare at first. She was focused on the quarterly reports, her fingers tapping against the folder in that way she did when numbers didn't add up. She wore a black turtleneck today, but she'd pulled it down slightly in the heat of his office, and there it was. Evidence of intimacy. Min-ho had spent 8 months pretending he didn't desperately want to claim for himself. Who gave you that? He said quietly. Not a question. A demand. Her hand flew to her neck instinctively. Her eyes went wide. Nothing. It's nothing. Min-ho stood slowly. The movement made his chair roll back slightly, the sound loud in the suddenly tense silence. Jasmine, he repeated, his voice dropping lower. Who touched you? She swallowed hard. He watched her throat work, watched the mark shift with emotion. Sir, it's personal. It doesn't affect my work. Everything about you affects me, he thought but didn't say. Instead he moved around the desk, closing the distance between them with deliberate steps. She held her ground, but he saw the tremor in her fingers as she clutched the file tighter. Was it that lawyer from the Park account? Min-ho asked. The one who kept finding excuses to visit your desk. What? No. Jasmine's brow furrowed. Why would you think that? Because I pay attention. Because I notice every man who looks at you longer than necessary. Because I've memorized the exact shade of your eyes when you're annoyed versus amused versus scared. Min-ho kept his expression neutral. Answer the question. It was my ex, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. He showed up at my apartment last night. We argued. Things got, she stopped. Physical. The world went very still. Physical, Min-ho repeated. Not like that. Jasmine's eyes met his, defiant now. He grabbed me. Tried to convince me to give him another chance. I told him no. He didn't take it well. Where is he now? Min-ho asked. His voice had gone flat. Dangerous. I don't know. Home, probably. Why? Because I'm going to kill him. The thought was so clear, so certain, that Min-ho almost said it aloud. Instead he reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he brushed his thumb just below the bruise, feather light. She flinched. Does it hurt? He asked softly. A little, she admitted. His jaw clenched. Did he hurt you anywhere else? No. Just that. She looked down. I'm sorry. I should have covered it better. You have nothing to apologize for. Min-ho stepped back, forcing himself to create distance before he did something catastrophically stupid like pull her into his arms and promise to destroy anyone who ever made her flinch again. Take the rest of the day off. What? Sir, I have 3 meetings scheduled and the Kim contract needs. I'll handle it, he interrupted. Go home. Rest. And Jasmine, his eyes locked onto hers. If he contacts you again, you call me immediately. Understand? She nodded slowly, clearly confused by the intensity in his voice. Okay. After she left, Min-ho stood at his window overlooking Seoul, his reflection sharp against the glass. His hands were shaking. He'd built the Kang Empire from blood and ambition, carved his name into the city's underworld through calculated violence and strategic patience. He'd killed men for less than what her ex had done. And Jasmine Carter, the American woman who'd walked into his legitimate business front 8 months ago with a resume and a guarded smile, had no idea she'd been living under the protection of a monster who wanted nothing more than to worship her. He made 3 phone calls. The first was to his head of security. The second was to a contact who specialized in information. The third was to someone who made problems disappear. By evening, Min-ho had a name. David Chen. 29. Financial analyst. History of possessive behavior and 2 previous girlfriends who'd filed complaints that mysteriously disappeared. He had Jasmine's address, her work schedule, and apparently no concept of consequences. Minute-Ho sat in his car across from David's apartment building, waiting. Patience was a skill he'd mastered early. When David finally emerged around 9, Minute-Ho followed him to a bar in Itaewon. Watched him drink. Watched him check his phone repeatedly. Watched him text someone, probably Jasmine, messages that would go unanswered because Minute-Ho had already ensured David's number was blocked on her phone without her knowledge. When David stumbled out drunk an hour later, Minute-Ho was waiting in the alley behind the bar. David Chen, Minute-Ho said calmly. David spun around, nearly losing his balance. Who the hell are you? Someone who doesn't appreciate bruises on things that don't belong to you. Minute-Ho's Korean accent thickened slightly, a tell he usually controlled but didn't bother hiding now. You touched Jasmine Carter last night. You hurt her. That's none of your, David started. Minute-Ho moved fast. One punch to the solar plexus, precise and brutal. David collapsed, gasping. When he tried to rise, Minute-Ho's foot pressed down on his chest, not hard enough to break ribs but enough to communicate absolute dominance. Listen carefully, Minute-Ho said, his voice conversational despite the violence. You will never contact her again. You will delete her number. You will forget she exists. If I hear you've so much as breathed in her direction, I will make you disappear in ways that will terrify your ancestors. Do you understand? David wheezed, nodding frantically. Good. Minute-Ho removed his foot. There are men watching you now. They will continue watching you. Consider this your only warning. He left David there, gasping in the alley, and returned to his car feeling marginally calmer. It wasn't enough. Beating one man couldn't erase the image of that bruise on Jasmine's neck. But it was a start. The next morning, Jasmine arrived at the office looking rested. The bruise was covered with makeup and a higher collar. She moved through her day with her usual efficiency, answering emails, coordinating meetings, organizing Minute-Ho's schedule with a precision that had made her indispensable. She didn't know that Minute-Ho had spent the night ensuring her safety. Didn't know that David Chen had booked a flight to Hong Kong that morning, his resignation from his job submitted via email, his apartment lease broken. Didn't know that 3 of Minute-Ho's men were now discreetly monitoring her building, her commute, every space she occupied. Mr. Kang, she knocked on his office door that afternoon. The Harrison merger documents are ready for your review. Come in, Minute-Ho said without looking up from his computer. She entered, setting the folder on his desk. Is everything all right? She asked after a moment. You seem distracted. He finally looked at her. The makeup covered the bruise well, but he could still see the faint shadow of it. I'm fine. How are you feeling? Better, she said, a small smile touching her lips. Actually, something weird happened. My ex texted me this morning saying he was leaving the country. Apologized for everything and said he wouldn't bother me again. Minute-Ho's expression remained neutral. That's good news. Yeah. She tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. I guess he finally got the message. It's just strange. He was so persistent before. People change their minds, Minute-Ho offered. Sometimes they realize they've lost something valuable and decide to walk away with dignity. Maybe. Jasmine didn't look convinced, but she let it drop. Well, I'm relieved either way. As she turned to leave, Minute-Ho spoke again. Jasmine. She paused. Yes. If you ever need anything at all, you can come to me. You know that, right? Something shifted in her expression. Uncertainty mixed with something warmer. I know, she said softly. Thank you, Mr. Kang. After she left, Minute-Ho returned to the window. Seoul sprawled below him, a city he'd conquered through blood and strategy. But watching Jasmine walk away just now, seeing that small smile and the relief in her eyes, Minute-Ho realized he'd trade every bit of his empire for the right to protect her openly. To erase every hurt she'd ever known. To replace that bruise with his own marks, given in passion instead of anger. He was falling. Had been falling since the day she walked into his office for her interview, nervous but determined, answering his questions with intelligence and warmth. 8 months of professional distance. 8 months of pretending she was just an assistant. 8 months of lying to himself about what he wanted. The bruise had shattered his denial completely. A week later, the office held its annual charity gala. Minute-Ho attended because it was expected, moving through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands, and making small talk with people whose names he'd forget by morning. He wore a black suit, his hair styled back, playing the role of legitimate businessman with the same skill he used when playing crime lord. Then Jasmine arrived. She wore a deep green dress that hugged her curves, her hair down in waves that caught the light. She'd come with some of the other office staff, laughing at something one of them said, completely unaware that every man in the room had turned to look at her. Minute-Ho's grip tightened on his champagne glass. She moved through the gala with easy grace, her warmth drawing people to her naturally. Minute-Ho watched from across the room, tracking her movements like a predator studying prey. He told himself he was being protective. Told himself it was concern, not possessiveness, that made his jaw clench every time a man approached her. Then Park Ji-hoon appeared at her side. Ji-hoon was the lawyer from the Park account, the one who'd found too many excuses to visit Jasmine's desk. He was young, handsome, from a good family. Everything Minute-Ho wasn't. Everything society would consider appropriate for someone like Jasmine. Minute-Ho watched Ji-hoon lean in, watched Jasmine smile politely, watched his hand settle on the small of her back as he guided her toward the bar. Something dark and violent roared to life in Minute-Ho's chest. Minute-Ho crossed the ballroom in seconds. He didn't plan the movement, didn't calculate the approach. His body simply moved, pulled by something primal and undeniable. He arrived just as Ji-hoon was ordering drinks, his hand still resting possessively on Jasmine's lower back. "Jasmine," Minute-Ho said, his voice cutting through the ambient noise. "I need to speak with you." She turned, surprise flickering across her face. "Mr. Kang." "Of course." She glanced at Ji-hoon apologetically. "Excuse me." Ji-hoon's hand fell away slowly, reluctantly. His smile was professional but his eyes held challenge. "We were just discussing the Harrison merger. I had some concerns about the third quarter projections." "I'll address those concerns Monday," Minute-Ho said flatly. "This is urgent." He didn't wait for Ji-hoon to respond. He placed his hand on Jasmine's elbow, gentle but firm, and guided her away from the bar toward a quieter corner near the terrace doors. She followed without protest, though confusion creased her brow. "What's wrong?" she asked once they were alone. "Did something happen with the merger?" "No." Minute-Ho released her arm, immediately missing the warmth of contact. He realized he had no actual reason to pull her away. No emergency. No crisis. Just jealousy burning through him like acid. He stopped. Started again. "That lawyer. Ji-hoon. Are you seeing him?" Jasmine blinked. "What?" "No. We were just talking. He had his hand on you." She tilted her head, studying him with those intelligent eyes that always saw too much. He was being polite. It didn't mean anything. "Men aren't polite without reason," Minute-Ho said, his voice rougher than intended. "He wants you." A flush crept up Jasmine's neck. "Even if he did, which I'm not saying he does, that's not really your concern, is it, Mr. Kang?" The formality of his title in her mouth felt like distance. Like walls he'd carefully built and now desperately wanted to tear down. "You're right," he said quietly. "It's not my concern." Except what?" Minute-Ho looked at her, really looked at her, and made a decision that would change everything. "Except I can't stand watching other men touch you. Can't stand the thought of anyone else making you smile. Can't stand going another day pretending I don't want you so badly it's destroying me." The confession hung between them, raw and impossible to take back. Jasmine's eyes went wide, her lips parting in shock. The gala continued behind them, music and laughter and conversation, but in their corner the world had contracted to just the space they occupied. "Mr. Kang," she whispered. "You can't, we can't." "Why not?" he asked, stepping closer. She didn't retreat. "Because you work for me? I'll resign tomorrow." "Because I'm Korean and you're American?" "I don't care." "Because my world is dangerous?" "I'll keep you safe." "Tell me the real reason, Jasmine." "Because," her voice caught. "Because I don't know if this is real or if you'll regret it tomorrow. If I'm just something you want because you can't have me." Minute-Ho reached out slowly, cupping her face with both hands. His thumbs traced her cheekbones with devastating gentleness. "Listen to me carefully," he said, his accent thickening with emotion. "I have spent 8 months memorizing everything about you. The way you bite your lip when you're concentrating. The sound of your laugh when something genuinely amuses you. The exact shade of gold in your eyes when sunlight hits them. This isn't a game. This isn't boredom. This is me, completely undone by you." Tears gathered in her eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I." He leaned his forehead against hers. "Terrified. But I'm more scared of losing you without ever trying." The kiss happened inevitably, magnetically. Minute-Ho's lips found hers with a hunger he'd suppressed for months, and Jasmine responded immediately, her hands fisting in his jacket as she pulled him closer. The taste of her, champagne and something sweet, made him dizzy. He angled her head, deepening the kiss, swallowing her soft gasp. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Minute-Ho rested his forehead against hers again. "Come home with me," he murmured. "Please." Jasmine nodded wordlessly. They left the gala without explanation, without goodbyes. Minute-Ho's driver took them to his penthouse in Gangnam, the city lights blurring past the windows while they sat in the back seat, fingers intertwined, not speaking because words felt insufficient for what was happening between them. The penthouse was minimalist and expensive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul. Jasmine stood in the center of the living room, suddenly uncertain now that they were alone. Minute-Ho poured 2 glasses of water, handed her one, watched her drink. "I should tell you something," he said quietly. "About who I really am." She set down the glass. "Okay." He told her everything. The Kang organization. The illegal operations hidden beneath legitimate businesses. The violence he'd committed, the blood on his hands, the empire built on fear and strategy. He told her about David, about the men watching her building, about every secret he'd kept. Jasmine listened without interrupting. When he finished, the silence stretched long enough that Minute-Ho prepared himself for her to leave. To run. To realize she'd made a terrible mistake. Instead, she stepped closer. "I should be scared," she said softly. "Probably should run. But I've felt safer these past 8 months than I have in years. And now I know why. You're not angry I didn't tell you." "I'm processing," she admitted. "But no. Not angry." She reached up, touching his face with tentative fingers. "You protected me. Even when I didn't know I needed it." Minute-Ho caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "Always," he promised. "I will always protect you." What happened next was inevitable and slow and devastating. Minute-Ho led her to his bedroom, every movement deliberate, giving her chances to change her mind. She didn't. They came together with months of suppressed want finally unleashed, hands and mouths learning new territory, whispered names, and breathless pleas. Minute-Ho was gentle despite his hunger, worshipping every curve, every soft sound she made, branding himself into her memory the way she'd been branded into his. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. Minute-Ho felt something settle inside him. Something that had been restless and violent for years finally going quiet. "Stay," he murmured into her hair. "Move in with me. Let me take care of you." Jasmine was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I need to think about it. This is a lot." "You're a lot." The fear hit him immediately. "I understand." She fell asleep against him, but Minute-Ho stayed awake, watching the city lights, feeling the warmth of her body and wondering if morning would bring regret. Wondering if he'd pushed too hard, revealed too much, wanted too obviously. When dawn broke, he woke to an empty bed. Panic seized him instantly. He checked the bathroom, the kitchen, the living room. Her clothes were gone. No note. No message. Just absence where she'd been. Minute-Ho called her phone. It went to voicemail. He called again. And again. By the 10th attempt, cold understanding settled over him. She'd run. Overwhelmed by his confession, his world, his intensity. She'd left rather than face him in daylight. He showed up at her apartment an hour later. Pounded on the door until she answered, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "Why?" he demanded. "Why did you leave?" Jasmine's voice was small. Because I woke up and you were sleeping and you looked so peaceful. And I realized I've fallen completely in love with you. And that terrified me because men like you don't stay. They take what they want and move on, and I couldn't. Her voice broke. I couldn't bear waking up one day and having you look at me like I'm nothing. Minute-Ho stared at her. Then he stepped inside, closed the door, and pulled her into his arms. You think I could ever look at you like you're nothing, he said roughly. You, who have been the only light in my dark world for 8 months. You, who make me want to be better than the monster I've become. You'll get bored, she sobbed into his chest. Or scared. Or you'll realize I'm not worth a complication. Listen to me. Minute-Ho tilted her face up, making her meet his eyes. I have killed men for far less than what you mean to me. I have built an empire on violence and fear. But you, Jasmine Carter, you have completely destroyed me in the best way possible. I am never letting you go. Never. Promise, she whispered. I promise, he said. On everything I am. On everything I have. You are mine now. And I take care of what's mine. They stayed in her apartment that day, talking through fears and futures. Minute-Ho told her about his childhood, about losing his parents young, about building power to survive. Jasmine told him about growing up in Atlanta, about her own losses, about running to Seoul to escape memories. They mapped each other's scars and promised to be gentle with the tender places. But the world Minute-Ho inhabited didn't allow peace for long. 3 days later, Jasmine disappeared. She'd left the office at her normal time. Minute-Ho had been in a meeting, his phone on silent. When he finally checked his messages an hour later, there was a video. Jasmine, bound to a chair in a concrete room, terrified but unharmed. A man's voice off camera speaking Korean. Kang Minute-Ho thinks he can leave the life. Thinks he can play businessman and keep his empire. This is a reminder. Nothing is untouchable. We will contact you with terms. The video ended. Minute-Ho watched it 3 times, his face expressionless. Then he made a phone call. 5 words. Mobilize everyone. No mercy. Within an hour, every resource of the Kang organization activated. Men he hadn't called in years answered immediately. Contacts across Seoul reported in. Security footage was pulled. Phone records analyzed. The machine Minute-Ho had built for violence and power turned its full attention to finding one woman. It took 4 hours. An abandoned warehouse in Incheon. The rival gang who'd taken her thinking they could leverage her for territory concessions. They'd underestimated what she meant to him. Underestimated what Minute-Ho would do. He arrived with 20 men, armed and silent. The assault was surgical and brutal. Minute-Ho moved through the warehouse like death itself, putting down anyone who stood between him and Jasmine with cold efficiency. He'd warned them. Had spent 3 years trying to be legitimate. They'd forced his hand. He found Jasmine in a back room, still tied to the chair, terrified but alive. The moment she saw him, tears spilled over. Minute-Ho. He cut her bindings quickly, pulled her into his arms. I've got you, he murmured. You're safe. I'm here. Behind them, his men finished clearing the building. Minute-Ho didn't look back at the bodies. Didn't care. Jasmine was alive. That was all that mattered. In the car, she clung to him, shaking. I'm sorry, she kept saying. This is my fault. If I hadn't been with you. Stop, Minute-Ho commanded gently. This is not your fault. This is the world I live in. And I will burn it all down before I let anyone hurt you again. At his penthouse, he tended to her carefully. She wasn't physically harmed, just scared. He ran her a bath, made her tea, held her while she cried. When she finally fell asleep exhausted, he made more calls. By morning, the gang responsible would be dismantled completely. Their territory absorbed, their leaders disappeared, their organization erased.